Hi, I'm Ed Scar.
And I'm Paul Allen.
And welcome back to the brush.
Welcome back to the brush. There's too many backs.
Back to the brush. Back to the brush.
Rewind.
And you may have noticed in our introduction there that we have a new image, the back of the screen, and also for our thumbnails as well.
Yeah. So we took that photo, a couple of months ago now, when I was last down at Ed's.
It's a while ago.
And we battered it over to one of my friends who does photo editing. And he made that for us because it's two individual photos of us each holding the same stick, just joined together.
I actually have two of those sticks.
Well, no, yeah. We both wouldn't fit in front of the same blue screen.
So we could have done it for real, but we didn't.
The blue screen wasn't big enough.
Yeah, we would have needed we used a garage for the blue screen. We would need a house-size blue screen. So in other introductory sorts of things, we should mention that we have an Instagram page. So if you're listening to this audio only, or if you want to have a closer look at some of the images we talk about, we'll cherry pick the best 10 and put them on our Instagram page, and the link for that will be in the description.
Yeah, I think it's probably important this month, just purely for some of the stuff like the brushes. There's no way I'm going to get that to come out on the camera. So this month we've got a couple of topics as always. We're going to be talking about brushes. We're going to be talking about the Gaunt Ghost series and a couple of references to some of Ed's individual videos. There'll be a link in the description. And as always, we'll start by showing a couple of things that we've been painting this month.
Would you like to get started on that?
Certainly. So I picked up the Necromunda figure, this Doctor, I want to say Arcanos. Here.
Dr. Arcanos.
Yes. Now, we don't actually play. Well, that came out quite well for once. We don't actually play Necromunda on the tabletop, but it was such a beautiful model.
We play Retromunda.
Yeah,
we play Retromunda on Tabletop Simulator.
So I picked him up and I did some painting just because it is a cool play Doctor, and with the coronavirus and all that, I just thought he's just a cool model.
It is 2020 after all.
He's not finished yet, but he's got a bit of blood for the blood god on his little knives and things like that.
Yeah, I have, and this model actually ties in with our topic about brushes, and I'll focus on that side of things in a moment. But just to start off with, this is one of the Wreck Age minis, and Wreck Age is spelt wreckage but with a dash, and it's a post-apocalyptic RPG, and these models have various armaments and scrap armor and all sorts of stuff.
So like
a very eclectic mix of,
like a Mad Maxy feel.
Very much a Mad Max feel. This particular model,
like Gaslands, is that what I want to call it? The one with the cars. It looks really cool.
It's very much related to Gaslands. I don't know if there's any direct connection between them, but in terms of the setting, it's very thematically similar. I think that Gaslands is far more concentrated on cars, car combat and car races, whereas Wreck Age is it's more of an interpersonal RPG. I assume they have vehicles at some point as well, but for the most part it's the people minis rather than car minis. But this one in particular, I spent quite a lot of attention on comparing techniques, and with the purple kind of loincloth thing that he's wearing, I wet blended that with the highlights, and then with the jacket, which is green, I did layered highlights, and I wanted to compare the two techniques. What I ended up doing is the final highlights on the loincloth are actually layered highlights. So I've wet blended the shadow. It's almost like what I want to be doing is wet blending in shadows, and then when it's dry, layer on the highlights to bring that in.
From my point of view, obviously, I saw it in stages because you were sending me photos via Discord. So it's it'll be interesting to see the actual finished unit. So I picked up this Majib, which was newly released. Majib last month.
Muad'Dib?
I can't remember what it's called. The box is down here. Hang on 1 second.
Is it an installation, or is it one of the drop from space things?
Hammerfall bunker. That's a good point. So at the minute, I don't really like this model for tabletop. So I thought,
you don't like the model, or you don't like the rules?
I like the model. I don't like the rules. I thought, it deploys from orbit. You know, you got these little legs. They clearly look like they fold down on cogs. So my thoughts were I was going to be able to use this to either deep deploy. Yeah. It goes down, the little legs come out, the missile comes off, and then I've got something to defend an area. So if I'm playing a game where I've got to take objectives, I can take an objective, launch this thing down, bam, that's deployed.
That sounds cool.
Area's secure. Yes. Yeah. Which is what I was hoping it was for, really. The time I bought this, I didn't have the 9th edition rules, and I still don't have the codex. So but it's not.
I've long since given up on trying to keep up with Games Workshop's book releases. I think it was 3.5 when I gave up.
Yeah, it's 8th. Everything's 8th. So in reality, this is deployed as a static tank. The best thing to describe it would be a whirlwind. It's a static whirlwind. So at the start of the game, I can place it in my deployment zone, and there it sits.
Oh, so it has to be in your deployment zone at the beginning, and then it can't move ever.
Yeah. So it's as people have described on Reddit, it's a whirlwind that can't move.
Is it cheaper than a whirlwind?
I don't know.
In terms of points,
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful model, but it was just my concept was like what's the drop prod variation that's got missile launchers in it instead of people?
I don't know the specific names, but I know there's one that opens out and it's got, I think it's twin heavy bolt guns on each side, or it's an assault cannon on each side. Yes. I think.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 points or 3 points.
There's that one.
I think it's 2 points.
And then there's one from Forge World that's just missiles, which again is pretty cool.
That sounds like a useful thing to be able to just drop that down, and it's probably not going to last very long. Deploying that particularly into somewhere where the enemy can get to, it's going to get knocked over pretty quick.
Again, which is why in my mind I was imagining securing an objective, deploying something like that building
to defend it.
Yeah, and then moving back out then with the rest of the troops.
Yeah, because that's much more, that's much better protected than just a drop pod with guns. So another thing that I've done is these 3 civilian models. Now these are from a model railway. They're you can often find passenger sets. Usually these would be painted up and thrown down on.
They look awfully large.
They are a little bit large, because the scales of model railways, none of them match up with 32mm or 28mm. They're close, but they are a little bit tall. But the next size down is way too small.
So have you bought these? Sorry, have you printed them?
No, I actually bought these quite a while ago. I bought a pack of 100 for like £3.
Nice.
so they're 3 pence each.
I was going to say
they're not. Yeah,
when I was a kid, my model railway, which would have been presumably 00 gauge, the people were like as big as your fingernail. They were like that. It's just like, yeah, it's got pink head. That's the guy.
HO is a common scale. I think these are, and don't quote me on this because I can't remember, but I think these are O scale, which would be 1 to 37 or 1 to 38, I think, ish. Which means they are slightly larger than Games Workshop stuff, which is nominally 1 to 40 to 1 to 45 ish, but not really. Some of it goes down into 1 to 48. it's the thing is, Warhammer, particularly Warhammer, but most 32mm RPGs as well, are hero scale. They're not true scale, so they're not a 1-to-1, but so they're not a true 1-to-48 or 1-to-45 scale model of something. They're okay, scale down to this height, but then their hands are big and their facial features are big and the guns are big to make them cartoony, to make them look more interesting when you've got something on the battlefield. I have some 1-to-48 World War II motorcycles, and in comparison to everything from RPGs, they look spindly and tiny and just little beams, but they are scale correct.
Yes, yeah.
These models are scale correct to their scale, but that scale doesn't really fit with 32mm models. They're about 35mm tall, but because they're true scale, they're really, really spindly. So they look like really tall, thin people.
Aliens.
Yeah. But I thought I'd paint up a few of these just to be objective markers. It's like, there's some civilians that you have to protect. Don't let them get killed. Stuff like that. And these may never get used, but it's one of those things where it took me a couple of hours to paint. I enjoyed painting them. And it's something that if I ever need, I've got them. I don't have to worry about making any. I have to say that these models are awful. They're
you
about
got 300
each.
I was going to say 3p.
Like I said, it's £3 or £3.50 for a pack of 100. They're 3 pence and some fraction of a pence each. They're mass produced and mass molded.
How many variations are there in there?
Actually, quite a few. There's at least 10 or 15. I can't remember exactly, but there's quite a few different poses.
Not swapping heads.
The mold lines are awful. Like I can see them even on these models, and I've tried to clean up the mold lines, but the mold lines are awful. They've got a massive injection point circle in their back.
Oh, I hate that.
A huge circle in their back of all three of them. I mean, all of the sculpts have the same.
Just talking about that and going off on a slight tangent. Why do Games Workshop put the injection mold point on their bases on the top and not the bottom?
Yes, I definitely want to know this. At this point, I'd rather have, like, either you have the common 3rd edition plastic kits had a completely flat base. Well, it was textured, but it was flat. It didn't have any lumps, like massive lumps in it. And then you glued the model down because it had big flat surfaces on the feet. Or you have a slotter base. Because if you're going to have a slotter base, you have to do some texturing anyway. If there's an injection mold point in the middle, it doesn't matter. But why, if it's not a slotter base, why would you have the injection mold in the middle? You can just put it on the underneath. Like you say, I absolutely agree with that.
I look at it every time I fill it in with like a bit of texture, and you just think, why is this here? Why?
In ye olden days, back in 2nd and 3rd edition, there wasn't much, like, basing wasn't really done. You'd put a model on a base and you'd paint the base, and that was it. You just paint the base a flat colour because you kind of wanted it to disappear. Yeah,
it's not really there.
Whereas now, particularly with scale modelers and display painters, the influence of those things, there's a lot more emphasis on putting stuff on the base, and it does look good, and I am learning. It's just something I'm less interested in.
I think that my problem is, like most people, they'll do the bases all the same for an army, whereas I just do anything. Like, that's fun, let's stick a bit of, I'll stick mud on this one.
What interests me today?
Yeah.
What interests me at this exact moment while I'm doing the base? Great, I'll do that.
Yeah. So, like, my Sisters of Battle, they're between gravel and like sand and like cactuses. I've gotten some of them, and it's just fun.
Yeah, the common complaint that I keep on seeing is people's like when I put sand on a base. People say, "Oh, it doesn't look like sand in scale. It looks like gravel." It's like, okay, maybe I wanted it to look like gravel. Most of my bases are grey, both for fantasy style and science fiction style images, because it's a generic color for masonry and broken buildings and the kind of war-torn thing that a lot of, not all, but a lot of models are relevant to those environments. And so having a rubble base, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can kind of just do everything like that, and if you're just doing a simple base and you're not actually doing a display base, if you're just doing a simple gaming base, that's fine.
As we've discussed before, you and I are the kind of people that would be happy to pay for someone who hasn't got a painted model at all.
True. I would not complain in the slightest if you turn up with a cardboard box and say, I want to try out Land Raiders because I haven't played with them before. Can I pretend this is Land Raider? Yeah, absolutely. You can use that for this game.
The cardboard, man.
I had a friend, I still actually have this friend, who found the Armoured Company rules. So this is a chapter approved from White Dwarf army list for, I can't remember if it was 3rd or 3rd and a half. I think it might have been the 3rd and a half edition. And it was essentially an Imperial Guard army, but just the tanks. So your troops choices you could choose a squad of infantry in a Chimera, or you could choose a platoon of Leman Russ. So you'd have up to 3 Leman Russ in one troop's choice. Yeah. And your heavy support would be obviously the long range stuff, the Basilisk, the Death Strike missile tank thing. I can't remember what it's called exactly. There's some fast attack choices like the flamer variant of the Chimera, which I can't remember the name of.
I don't remember.
I keep on thinking Hellhound, but I think that's the space. That's the Rhino.
Isn't the little walkery thing, scout thing, a fast choice as well? Yeah, I've got one of those.
Can't remember what it's called. Sentinel.
Yeah,
Imperial Guard Sentinel. Yeah. And your command choice, your headquarters choice. You could choose a character with an infantry squad and put him in a Chimera, or you could just have a command tank, and it would be a Leman Russ with, and you'd have a little character model that you could put on the turret and say, like, this is my command tank.
So he did all this with cardboard, did he?
And so he had an entire army of Leman Russ, and it was literally just the cheapest Leman Russ. Don't bother with sponsons. You just line up as many Leman Russ as you can. You got loads of cannons. Nothing could stand up to it. Absolutely nothing. It started off with cardboard models, and he did actually build this army out of real models. Eventually, it just took a while.
Oh yeah. Well, tanks they're a long build and they're a long paint.
Yeah, not the way he painted them. He painted them really quickly.
And they're really, really expensive.
They were less expensive back then.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know how much a Leman Russ is these days. I think it's £35, but they used to be 18. And I think it's the same sculpt. I think it's the same model.
I mean, the only one that tempts me is a Baneblade, and that's only because I want to sit and paint it.
Because it's this big.
It's really big and detailed. I just want to sit and paint it.
There's the Victoria miniatures also make a tank. I can't remember a kangaroo, I think, that's pretty size. I don't think it's quite Baneblade size, but it's pretty big.
Yeah. The company that made the mounted Inquisitor model I've got for my sister's army. Can't think what they're called. Is it Hextor?
Ooh. Yes, yeah, I think it was.
They do a train, a grimdark train, and it's enormous. It's like that, and that looks really fun.
That sounds like a lot of fun. When it comes to large-scale models, there's a couple that I'm vaguely interested in. I haven't actually got around to like getting them, particularly for my Orc army, which is still my most sizable army, and I'm not painting large numbers anymore, so I probably won't ever have a large army like this again. Or I won't have another one, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But adding to my Orc army, there are some big models that I'm noticeably missing. A lot of the current armies have Morkonaut and Gorkonaut.
Yes.
Now, back in 3rd edition, there were no rules for it, but I wanted to make a Stomper. Custom built, just a tower of cardboard armor plates and that kind of thing. So that's kind of something I'm thinking about on and off, maybe getting to. But the one I really wanted, because I like playing as the feral orcs rather than the like speed freaks or the goths or anything. The snake bites, the feral orcs, were much more interesting to me because they had squigs.
Yes.
Attack squigs, and they had the goblin riders if you wanted. You could have units of orc infantry that didn't have guns, just 2 axes each, choppers, like all day long. Good fun, proper orcs, and they had something that none of the other orc army lists had, and that was a squigoth. So imagine a war elephant in historical terms. Roman, Greek, that kind of thing, war elephant. Now imagine instead of being an elephant, it's a gigantic squig.
Is there a platform on it then, or what? Like...
Yeah, you'd have a platform on it, you'd have guns like all the way around, you'd be covered in orcs. Just a massive, great big monster marching across the battlefield. It would be in the same category as a lot of the big Tyrannid bioforms. I'm pretty sure one of the demons is kind of up on that same kind of scale, and certainly the smaller titans like the Warhound, stuff like that. It's that size in terms of how big of a model it is. How effective it is, I've no idea because I never played with one. I never had one. Not even a cardboard one.
I'm willing to bet it's a Forge World model, at least now, if it still exists.
I think it was always a Forge World model. I don't think Citadel ever sold it.
Yeah.
I tell you what, it's definitely not, because if Citadel had sold it, I would have bought one. Because back then I would have just been like, Squigoth?
Gimme.
Mine. Yeah, so definitely not. I'm not sure if it was ever in a White Dwarf. I think it was. Back in these days, this kind of thing was in White Dwarf. But things like toy dinosaurs... Think of a 4-legged dinosaur, because I do not know my dinosaurs.
Triceratops.
I have disappointed my 5-year-old self.
Triceratops.
Yeah, Triceratops with the big shield and 3 horns. Absolutely. Triceratops. Get Triceratops model. Sculpt on some massive, great big gnashing teeth at the front. And a platform on the back with loads of orcs and loads of guns. Yeah, sorted.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I like about the Orc Army, is the fact that you can be mega creative. And...
Gotta love orcs.
You know, like... We like Space Marines and the sister. I've got a Space Marine army and I've got a Sisters of Battle army. They're both kind of regimented. You got some variation, but
I have seen a lot of very interesting conversions. It's usually like a custom chapters. And Space Wolves is probably the most diverse. Unless you go Chaos. Chaos have you can go all sorts of directions with Chaos.
I've got to sort out my Plague Marines. I haven't painted any of them.
So I can shoot them.
I've got a pot of that that like Blood for the Blood God is a technical. There's one for like pus and stuff for them that came with
that sounds about right.
Conquest magazine. I don't know where it is. I'm not looking at my paint, but yeah, I want to play with that. Right.
Something to go on with a brush, and while we're talking about brushes, let's go on to our first topic for today, given that we've just kind of rambled on for a long time.
Wow.
A subject that wasn't on the script, but that's fine because we don't have a script.
Yeah.
It is now a subject for this video.
So last week I was looking at my paintbrush, and this is a small layer brush, a Citadel one, and I think it's getting a bit thin, so I cracked open a new one. So this is the brush I've been using since I started painting again.
So this is about a year's worth of painting.
Yeah. And
as has been mentioned several times, Paul paints like a machine. He's always painting. He's always got a new model on the go.
So yeah, so I've wore a brush down. I've wore a brush down.
Worn a brush down to nearly nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Have you had any issues with that brush? Has it split apart? Has it like curled or anything like that? So it's been good all the way through.
So when I first started, obviously I bought a set. So like that's the large. I mean that's wrecked, right? And I bought a replacement large. That's wrecked.
Yeah, so that's not a good product review. Well, it's not a good review in terms of how good that brush is. But if the standard brush you've used for so long that it's worn to less than half of its original size with no other issues, that's a good brush.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, the large and the medium, I seem to get through them. I think it's just because when I'm doing larger areas, I'm going quicker. Yeah, to be honest,
I guess it's the ones that you use the most as well.
No, that one's probably the one I use the most.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I have had my share of cheap brushes over the years. I started with some Citadel ones, and they were fine, but that's like 15, 20 years ago, and I can't remember what those brushes were like. But when I got back into it, I needed some more brushes, so I bought a pack of cheap ones from Hobbycraft or whatever, and they did not go well for me. They were just crowning, splitting apart all the time. And so I looked up some reviews, watched some videos of people comparing brushes, and one of the ones that popped up a couple of times was this, which is the Raphael Kalinsky 8404, and this is size 2/0, and I noticed that it was quite small. Just when it first arrived, it was quite small, smaller than I'm used to. And
in terms of the tip,
well, in terms of the actual brush part of it, the bristles.
Oh, okay, the length of the bristles.
Yeah, it's quite short from the factory. It's quite short. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. I'll see how it goes. Later on, I found some other reviews and comparisons of brushes that say that the Raphaels aren't meant for mini paints. They're not meant for acrylic paints at all. Like I don't understand why they're not made for acrylic paints. But there's a suggestion that they shouldn't be used for acrylic paints. And once I'd painted about 3 models... And I took this is a long painting job. This isn't like a 30-minute speed paint. This is like probably 30 to 50 hours worth of painting on these 3 models. After that, which I consider a very short length of time for a brush, it started splitting apart and crowning. At first it split into 2, and then I cleaned the brush, I brought it back to a point. I managed to get into the next model before it started to split again. And it's just been constantly splitting the whole time. And more recently, it's actually started splitting into 5 distinct separate small brushes. So I kind of gave up on it. And I've got myself a new brush, which is another more expensive one. And this is a brush that is far more widely used, widely mentioned in kind of mini painting scene. And this is a Winsor & Newton Series 7. And this is a size 2, which is even smaller. Can you see how much smaller that brush is?
Yeah.
So this is new. This one hasn't. Okay, I've painted 5 or 6 models with this now, and I do like it. It comes to a very nice point. Both of these brushes do come to a very nice point, but the Winsor & Newton hasn't had the splitting apart problem. Now it's not old enough yet for me to say fully. Kind of to fully give it the okay, but given how many other people have kind of suggested this brush, I can probably trust it. It's a very good brush. It's just a bit too small, so I will probably at some point eventually get another Series 7, but like a size 4 or 5, something much bigger.
Yeah. Did I see Midwinter doing a set of brushes now?
Squidmar?
Is it Squidmar? Someone sent them to Dana Howe for a review. I was watching it on her channel.
I know that Squidmar did a Kickstarter recently. He's not manufacturing them.
No, of course not, no.
It's just his name on it.
But in that video, Dana mentioned that you couldn't use, I think she said, contrast paints on them.
Interesting.
I just thought that's really odd. And were you saying about that brush not being fit? And I'm wondering whether maybe the bristles are absorbent, and then the drying is causing it to expand in one direction or the other, to warp.
There is definitely some chemistry involved in paint. Brent from Goobertam Hobbies is probably the person to ask there, because he's the scientist of the YouTube lot. But there's definitely some chemistry involved in the different types of paint, and that's not just acrylic versus oils. That's even acrylic paint versus an acrylic wash versus an acrylic contrast, and other variants of things, because you're adding different chemicals in the medium as well. The pigment, the medium, the binder, they can be different chemicals in different in different combinations, and I don't know enough to come up to a conclusion on there.
Show my favourite brush. It's this guy. So these are available on eBay and Amazon. They're 50p for a pack of 4, and yeah, they're ideal for dusting computers.
12 and a... So not for painting, but for dusting.
No, I've never used them to paint anything. It's funny because so I work in IT and I do desktop support and stuff like that. So occasionally I run through purchase orders for packs of 50p jumbo paint pot pen brushes, and the finance department are like, "Why are you buying kids' paintbrushes?"
I think the only brush that I have from the old days of Games Workshop is the tank brush.
A tank brush.
They used to sell. I don't know if they still have something equivalent, but they used to sell a brush called the tank brush, and it was the biggest brush they sold by probably 5 or 6 times the next brush down, and it didn't come to a point at all. It was like a squared off brush, not a flat brush. It was still round, but it had like a crew cut, and it was just for painting massive areas like tanks.
Airbrush.
and now we have airbrushes. Why are airbrushes called airbrushes? Because they're not brushes. They're called paint guns everywhere else. Is it just because people don't like the word gun in like car shops where they paint cars?
But is that an official term, or is that just something they call it because it's?
I don't know. That's
like me calling the Hoover a Hoover when it's a vacuum.
It gets confusing when you talk about, I'm going to paint this with an airbrush instead of a brush, or a brush instead of an airbrush. Well, do you call it a bristle brush, a hard brush? Because without a suffix or a prefix,
it's a kinetic brush.
The main point, the reason why I wanted to talk about brushes, is the thing I haven't mentioned. So going back to the railway people that I painted, not only are they terrible models, but I also used a terrible brush to paint them. Because for the last episode of Back to the Brush, episode 2, I brought my 2 brushes up, my Winsor & Newton and my Raphael. I brought them up and put them on my keyboard ready to show them off, and then we didn't talk about brushes. So these 2 brushes were up on my keyboard upstairs, away from my painting area, for several weeks before I eventually brought them back down. And so these models, and in fact the Rec Age model as well, are painted with the Craftworld brushes. And these were so difficult to paint. Now, I did manage to get a good result on them. The Rec Age model in particular, I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. But going from the Raphael, even with it splitting apart, just trying to keep it together and painting this through, going from this brush to a cheap brush was such a big step down.
Yeah.
Made me really appreciate just how good a quality this brush is. Assuming you are using the right type of paint, that means it's not going to split apart. And so I struggled through with these models, but I painted them, and I painted them with a terrible brush. And I'm glad I've done that, because it means I don't have to do it again. I can paint eyes with a much bigger brush than this. It just needs to come to a sharp point. If you give me a brush this big that comes to as good a point as this, I can paint eyes with it.
Yeah. I think what would be cool is for our upcoming episode, if I ever go with both brushes.
Yeah, maybe that's a test we can do for the next episode. We'll get a bunch of different brushes and we'll paint. I've got some.
Well, if we just get to the same railway model, and then
I've got another 97 of them.
Get two of the same railway model. Do one with a good brush, one with a rough brush, and then have a look.
I think that's definitely worth doing, just as a comparison.
And I'll paint one with this. If Brent can paint a model with his finger, I can paint a model with that.
That's a funny video. I definitely don't want to finger paint a model. That's something.
To be fair,
that's something I'm not gonna do.
The other guy he did the video with, his came out really well.
Because he recognised the failings of the tool, his finger. He understood. He very quickly articulated this in the video. He very quickly understood the physicality of how paint transfers from his finger onto the model, and he worked with it.
Yeah,
rather than trying to paint like you would normally paint, except with a finger instead of a brush, he realised that paint comes off of a finger differently, so he needed to try different
dripping
techniques.
It down.
Yeah,
it came out really well.
Yeah, and while it is still a terrible paint job in comparison to what you could do with a brush, it shows that mindset is part of it, and understanding the technicality is part of it. Now I will show off these, which are the official Games Workshop models for the Tanith First and Only, which are characters from a book series written by Dan Abnett and released by the Black Library. I've been doing a series of videos on a video on painting each individual one, and if this video if the podcast goes up on time, I'll have just released the video on Gaunt, who is the last model in the series, and the one video upcoming will be the bases. And so you'll see that the base is already done. Sneak peek, spoiler warnings for that. This is how they came out, and it has been an interesting kind of exercise in painting a model version of a character that I'm familiar with in the book series.
Yeah. Now, do the books have illustrations, or is the image completely in your mind?
It's almost completely in your mind. There's official artwork on the covers. So each book has its own cover art. Strangely enough, the cover art doesn't always agree. The camo pattern changes in different versions of the cover art, and the uniforms change, and they're different versions of Lasgun. So you can't necessarily take the front cover as canon. Yeah. But then the description inside, Dan Abnett doesn't particularly tie himself up on being perfectly accurate in terms of the canon. He'll change things to fit the story he's telling. Now, there's nothing too egregious in terms of that, but you sometimes do need to go, okay, this is fine. It's just part of how the story's going this time.
So stuff like from watching your videos of stuff like, were you talking about the tattoos and stuff like that, which
yes,
obviously I find quite interesting.
So the Tanith Born, all of them have tattoos, and they have loads and loads of tattoos. The Vergast, also a lot of them have tattoos, but it's not universal. So, spoiler warning for the third book in the series of 15. So, yeah, this is kind of early on in the series, but it is the third book. The Tanith First and Only takes heavy casualties, and they end up technically under strength. And on the planet of Vergast, many of the civilians end up joining in on the fighting because, like, their homes are destroyed. The Imperium can't take refugees off planet fast enough, and so a lot of them end up joining in the fighting. And particularly as the 40k universe is kind of militaristic to begin with. This is quite believable. But a lot of them, after the victory is achieved, spoilers, they win, unsurprising. They join the Tanith First and Only. The War Master passes the Act of Consolidation, I think it's called, which is just a case of anyone who fought, you can join the Guard and you can join any of the regiments that fought in the war. And they'll go through basic training before they officially join that regiment.
Yeah.
They're not just a case of, oh yeah, hi, I'm the new guy. I'm a civilian.
Right, I shot someone. Give me a gun.
Yeah. Yeah. So they do have combat experience. If they've survived through the war, they are obviously somewhat competent. They did learn. It's very Stalingrad-esque. There's a lot of Russian influence in.
Oh, interesting.
In how, not just how the war plays out, but how the characters are. I assume that's deliberate. But the Vergast come from all backgrounds. So there's like gangers. Particularly Tona Creed is the most famous character. She was a gang member, low class, and yet there are other characters who are from like up hive. Certainly not the high houses, but from respectable cultures. Yeah, but they've still lost their livelihoods. They've lost their wealth, and they kind of have to start from scratch. And as an example of that, Anna Kurth, who I also made a model of, and haven't shown the video of her because it was a converted model. So she's going to be involved in the basing video. So I'll show off some decent video of that there. But she is a surgeon from higher up the hive. So she doesn't have these ganky tattoos that a common filth would have. No, of course not. But she joins the Tanith First and Only as surgeon, which a military unit is going to make good use of, you would think. And I just find it really interesting to have painted models that I've read so much about. Like I said, there's 15 books. I've been reading these for years and years and years. The first book came out 20 years ago. I should have looked that up. 15, 20 years ago, at least. And I'm painting models based on that. It's really hard to paint in a personality.
Yes.
I don't know how, particularly Brent from Goobertown Hobbies, he always talks about, like, and in his Goobertown Roulette, he'll come up with a character trait or a personality.
Yeah, he does a little backstory, doesn't he? As he's going, he kind of, he says, I'm imagining that this model would be.
How that guides your painting, I have no idea. I don't know how to do that. And so I painted them from more of a technical point of view rather than a personality point of view. But I have brought in this, not parts of their personality, but where they've been physically described, I brought that into the models.
I mean, suppose if you had a character who was described as like, they've got a favourite set of boots they've had for years and they're all scruffy and held together with, plasters and sellotape, that kind of thing, that you could paint.
Yeah, but if they're brooding,
it's
or if they're cold and calculating, or if they're genial and happy, how do you paint those?
Well, when you can't control the model, you can't really, can you?
I guess there must be ways that you can imply some things, shading the face or highlighting the face in different ways to. I'm nowhere near a good enough painter to paint that. So are there any characters that you would like to see as models that you haven't seen already? Characters that you know well from books, from TV, from film, whatever.
So at the minute I've been buying quite a few of the Fallout models. Yeah, there's an RPG game and there's a separate one. It's like Wasteland Survival, maybe? Wasteland Warfare?
Well,
Warfare, maybe.
Whatever the game is called.
Yeah. Anyway, so they're all 32 they're 32mm models. So there's a lot of characters from the games that they're releasing as special units to go alongside.
Nice.
So, for example, I've got
that's really nice.
Yeah, so the actual characters from the game, like from Fallout 4, there's like some of the followers you get. So you can, because obviously they're RPG games, or action RPGs we call them nowadays. But like, you can choose to romance, and then that's your partner.
Is this game made by Bethesda by any chance?
Yes. Yeah. So there's like individual models of like the followers and stuff like that, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. And these are the named characters.
Mm-hmm. They're quite interesting, those, because they've got like them. They do STLs, official STLs as well. You can buy and print.
Nice.
Which is cool.
Yeah, that is really cool.
I'm waiting at the minute. They've just released the Enclave, which is a faction from Fallout 3 and the earlier games. Those should have come at the start of the month, but I still haven't had those yet. So waiting for those.
Everything is delayed this year.
Well, yeah,
everything is delayed this year, so it's fine. Just be patient, and they'll come around.
With those, it's more wanting the models to paint the models than play the game. To be honest, I just like
Oh yeah. Same from my point of view. I very rarely play tabletop games, but I really enjoy painting. I love painting them, particularly characters that I like. I have also picked up recently the Warlord Games Dread versus Death.
Oh yes, yeah.
Which is it's a display model far bigger than you would.
So
it's the same
54?
scale. It's 32mm scale, but it's two characters joined together in one model, so it is still pretty big. And it's kind of like Death, who is this kind of ghostly character wisping around Judge Dredd. So I have that. I haven't started painting that. I've got it built and primed, but haven't dug into painting that just yet. There's also, of questionable officialness, Hassle-Free Games are selling Spec Ops Team that are quite clearly Stargate SG-1.
Yes, you did show me the link, yeah.
And I want them, but they're always out of stock. You can buy the individual ones, they're often in stock, but there's always one of them that's out of stock, so they can't sell the pack.
And the pack's cheaper, I guess.
The pack is like half the price of buying them individually.
No, that's rough.
It's crazy cheap. Eventually they'll discontinue them and I'll never have them. That's probably what's going to happen at this point. But that's another set that I'd like.
Me and my wife play the Witcher series of computer games, and we've got the audio books. We haven't got the written books because I'm not the greatest fan of written literature, I must admit. I've got the audio books.
You can't read.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. So, so if you look above my head there, you've got Geralt of Rivia there, and there's different characters obviously in the Witcher universe, and I'd quite like some models of those. Now my wife's got some large, they're like that 30cm models. They're on this
1/6 scale. So
we got those on display downstairs in the living room, and they're really cool. And I wanted some miniatures for that, and
having some 32mm, that would be cool.
Yeah. So I came across a company called Legends of Sygem. I'll put that on the screen, then you can see how you think you pronounce that.
If you type in the comments how you're supposed to pronounce it, then we still won't be able to pronounce it because that's a text box.
Well, I was hoping you would. So this particular game is obviously a fantasy game, and they make their own models, and they have some, I'd say, inspired models. So
are these also suspiciously similar but legally distinct models?
Yes, definitely legally distinct.
Similar to the Spec Ops Team.
Yes, definitely.
Hassle-Free.
So this is White Witch Hunter.
That's the cover art.
that's not the White Wolf. That's a White Witch Hunter. So there's a little data card for him.
Right.
Cool. And then in the games there is Ciri, which is like his adopted daughter as such. So that's the model of her. Again, like she's got a Witcher medallion hanging off her sword. So yeah. And then a bit more of a stretch on this one, but in the books, and again, he has a friend called Dandelion who's he's a bard, so he sort of follows him around, and he sings
wandering bard.
Yeah, he sings songs of Geralt's deeds, like slaying. So there was that one again from the same manufacturer. There was some options on this one, but that one I think was the nicest finish. So I'm going to paint him up as
different
Dandelion.
hands and things.
Yeah, so you could have. I think it was like a music note, like weapon. I think, can't remember.
Keyblade.
But obviously, I wanted him to look more like Dandelion, so I've got those three, which are really cool. I'd like to do Yennefer, which is Geralt's main love interest, I'll say. A complicated stories. Yeah, and then he's.
Not a Bethesda game?
No. I'm going to say he's bit on the side, Triss.
All right, then.
I'd like those two models as well, so I'm going to have a look through their website and see if there's any.
See if you can find them under other suspiciously distinct names.
But yeah, so these are really nice, but I haven't got around to painting them yet.
There is some legalities when you come to making things that are very similar to someone else's intellectual property, and a lot of the times when it comes to characters, the name is trademarked or copyrighted, and so the name is protected and the symbols are often protected.
Yes.
But the actual look of the character often isn't.
The magic loot, I don't think is inspired by Dandelion, but these two, they definitely are, because they're both called witch hunters. But yeah, the names are miles off.
Inevitably, this argument will go round to Games Workshop and their strong protection of their designs. Things like Space Marine power armor is distinct to
I was thinking
Games Workshop.
Because the word power armor isn't, of course.
The term power armor isn't. So if you made a model that happens to be in some form of power armor or powered armor, that's fine. But if you copy the style of Games Workshop's, like the Space Marine power armor from Warhammer 40k, that's not correct.
So
that's not
I think the Fallout power armor is very
different
concept.
style.
It's a similar concept.
It's the same concept. It's you have armor that's so heavy a person can't walk around with it, so you put servos in to move the arms and legs around. That's existed for decades as a concept in science fiction. I'm pretty sure it's existed as a concept in real world robotics for decades as well. It's not new.
Yeah. Boston Dynamics people, brilliant stuff over there. Let's have a look at my my Eliminators.
So this is going back to the Gaunt's Ghost models.
So if Ed just brings those up and just shows everyone,
I'll try and show who's got
a 360.
Who's got the clearest? This is probably the clearest.
Ed's done obviously a. Is it on a weekly basis? Feels like I think it's a weekly basis.
It's just about. I haven't been releasing them on the same day, but it's about once a week.
So Ed's been doing like a video tutorial of him painting each of these models, talking about the character and their background and stuff, sort of videos. So I quite like those videos. I have a set of Primaris Eliminators. So these are like sniper boys. Now again, as I've discussed before, I play Hawklords, so my Space Marine army are purple and gold.
The best colour.
So I started working on the commander. This isn't finished yet. I'm in the bases and but as you can see, I sort of followed Ed's collar design for the cape. I thought it'd be quite fun to try and replicate Ed's painting style.
And it's nice to see that my Gaunt's Ghost models have some Space Marines with the same pattern of cloak.
So yeah, I was basically trying to replicate Ed's design there, in terms of, I mean, the colours I used. One of them, in fact, is a skin tone, but I mean, yeah, roughly.
We have different paints, so that's fine. The exacts don't matter. In fact, when I was painting these ones, I never remembered or wrote down or made any mark of which paints I was using for my camo scheme. So over the 10 models that I've now painted, they're different.
There's variation. I don't know if we've got a copy of the photo I sent you when I first copied Ed's design. All my lines as such came out far too uniform, so I had to go back in on these and make them more sort of irregular shaped, like you would see in camouflage.
Yeah, I found the same thing when I was painting mine. I would put down 2 and then go for the third and then very deliberately go, no, I'm going to just put that off a bit. I'm going to put that off of where the pattern would be. And then I'd go for another one and then, okay, where's the pattern? Okay, now go off from that pattern. And then I'd fill up each of the base colour and then go on to another colour and I'd do the same thing. Because otherwise it looks... Yeah, it looks like a repeated pattern, and that's not what you really want in a camouflage scheme.
I'm pretty happy with that. I mean, so I did a dark green, and then I did a blue wash over the top, and then a dry brush of a light green.
Interesting. It's really interesting that you used a blue wash rather than a green wash. Of course, green is blue and yellow, and you can highlight up green into yellow, and so you can shadow green into blue. I think it makes perfect sense.
The only green wash I've got, which is this one, I just think is far too bright. I don't think it would have worked.
For me, it was all wet blending for the highlights. I didn't specifically paint in shadows, but I painted so much highlight that there is effectively a shadow. What the base coat became the shadow, and then the mid-tone is kind of the first of the highlights. From what I've seen in the pictures, they came out pretty good. Yeah,
I mean, there's only the one. The other two are this guy's got a silver gun and the 2 greens and the wash, and that's about it. Talking about the bases, I was quite interested on these models, the way they've got like bits of rubble and stuff, and between his legs there's a skull, and the other 2 came with just bits of terrain to glue down, so like this.
It's a nice thing for them to add. It can get a bit too specific for some people, but I'm not going to turn it down. It's a nice option to have. It might not fit with every style. If you wanted to have, you want to do ice bases, or you want to do
but you don't put them on, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. Although that's a really nice way of hiding a slaughter base.
There's not many of my Games Workshop ones that come with. It's normally one of the fancy models, like. So if we look at some of the hero, what are these called? They are Space Marine heroes. So
beakies.
Yeah, but the blind bag.
Fancy beakies.
Yeah. So I got these from Manchester Nerfer. Got a couple of them. They've got like fancy bases. I don't know. I quite like the fancy bases, but then at a certain point it removes option. Like that's like a crater. This one, it's got to be a crater. You can't. But like this one, look, that one's an entire base. There's bits of girder and bricks.
So long as it's easy to remove, I think that's a good idea.
Well, the problem is you can't, because like on that other one, his foot is moulded into the base. If I pull him off, his foot's still here, look.
How much effort would it be to cut the foot away from the base?
I don't think you would be able to be honest. I mean, I'm not going to, obviously, but I mean, it's just...
That brings us on to another very common complaint that I absolutely want to mention. Games Workshop's recent models, where the models are cut based on what the computer thinks they should be cut as, and not cut based on what material the model is actually showing. That like the left thigh and the front sash is one part, and then the other, like his foot and the back of the sash, is another part, and then his right hip and his chest and his left shoulder are another part, and his head's connected through the middle into his leg.
Yes.
That's not a helpful way of splitting models. This is a common complaint.
It doesn't give you variety, does it, in terms of moving things around?
The really annoying one I had on a Battle Sister recently, that just the mold, the gap in the mold, because the front of the shoulder pad was in one piece and the back of the shoulder pad was in the other, and it was just traced around, like the gap in the mold was traced around the fleur de lis. Was it fleur de lis? Whatever the detail was.
It's in two halves. I know which one you mean. I've got one like it.
Gluing that together and hiding that join over detail, that's difficult. That's particularly for a newbie, that's a difficult thing to do. And I'm not a newbie. I'm an experienced model maker. I have kit bashed a lot of things and sculpted a lot of things, and that was I had to look at that and really think hard about how I was going to approach it before I even started. That's how difficult that is.
I've got one of my sisters that are like that.
Have you been watching any of the popular TV series coming out recently?
No.
Mandalorian, Star Trek Discovery?
No. No. We watched some Midsummer the other day.
The cutting edge brand new TV series that is Midsummer.
Midsummer Massacres.
Midsummer Murders. I actually don't think I've ever seen an episode of Midsummer Murders.
I really enjoy it. I'm like an old person.
I watched... what was her name? The author who went round and there would suspiciously always be a murder wherever she went, and then she'd solve the murder.
It's Murder, She Wrote.
That's the one.
Jessica
Murder,
Fletcher.
She Wrote.
Jessica Fletcher.
Yes.
That. There's a
if someone can make a 32mm Jessica Fletcher or an STL so that I can print one out, let me know.
There's a YouTuber I subscribe to who does she does reviews of TV programs. I found on a random Baywatch episode review, but she does like Baywatch and Murder, She Wrote and like Golden Girls and stuff like that. It's really funny, and she just goes through some of the weird episodes of Murder, She Wrote, and it just makes me laugh.
So all of the episodes of Murder, She Wrote?
No, but there are some odd ones where they'll have like Magnum PI crossover and stuff like that.
Oh, cool. I've seen a lot of it. I haven't ever binged it.
No.
I need to go back and do the millennial thing of watching it every episode back to back.
Remember,
because that's how you're supposed to watch TV.
When I was at uni on a Wednesday on the last year, we used to have to go to my mate Stuart's house because we were working in a group project, and we always used to watch Diagnosis Murder. I was like, yeah.
Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, Dick Van Dyke, yeah.
Yes.
It's Wednesday afternoon, and we watched DM on Wednesday afternoon. Never did any medical work, did he? For like a chief surgeon or whatever he was, he never did any bloody work.
The one episode of Diagnosis Murder that I remember the most happened inside a hospital.
Okay.
And the reason they caught the murderer, or the big evidence that he had at the end of the episode, was that earlier a character who was a surgeon came through and talked to them, and he was like, his apron was covered in blood and whatever. It's like, this is not how a surgeon would walk through a hospital, covered in blood. They would clean up when they left the surgical room, but he was covered in blood. And he had a conversation and then walked off and everything was fine. Then they found the body later on and oh no, who's the murderer? And at the end of the episode he was like, there was a power cut for the last 3 days. There's been no surgeries. Why was he
walking around with
we just assumed, oh, he's a surgeon, he's covered in blood, this is perfectly normal, everything is fine, except one, you would clean up when you left the surgical room and surgery, and you would and there were no surgeries anyway because the hospital had no power and was shut down.
It's crazy. Like so I work in healthcare, and the idea of shutting the place down for more than 30 minutes because of power would be absolutely shocking.
I don't remember the exact details of the episode. I'm probably misremembering it. We can probably have a message from the Auto Redactus next week to say, well, actually, the episode went like this.
Do you remember? Have you ever watched Quincy?
No.
Quincy ME.
Quincy Sharp?
I don't know what he was. Quincy He was a morticianer and he used to solve crimes. Same thing again. He never did any fucking work. The start of the episode, he'd be cleaning. He'd just be finishing up doing an autopsy on a body, shove them in the drawer, and then go off and solve their murder. And then he had like a sidekick character called Sam. And Sam did all the bloody work. Like, he'd come in the office and go, "Oh, Sam, I've got some more." Sam's there, like, doing the actual, like...
The actual mortician.
The actual mortician work, yeah. Sam did all the work.
What's the one where the girl's dead? Like, there's a woman who died, and she solves crimes by being a ghost. No, not a ghost. Zombie. She died, she solves crimes because she's a zombie.
I have never heard of that.
I'll have to do some research on that.
Is it Medium, the one we had, based on Alison Dubois, who, like, she works for the police and
maybe,
and she gives them psychic clues, like, right?
Yeah, something like that. That's a massive tangent that we've just wandered off on.
Whatever. Just stick it in after the credits.
Yeah, if we ever get famous and we have a Patreon and we can do
an after party.
Anyway, should we wrap this episode up, because we seem to have been wandering around a lot of different subjects and talking about a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense or is relevant to anything that we're supposed to be talking about. Have you got any plans for the next episode?
No.
Knowing full well that our next episode, if all's goes to plan, will be a special recorded in-person version. Live. It won't be live. It might be live.
You think?
Probably won't be live.
I've swore how many times in this recording? No. Yep. So yeah, we'll probably, I don't know if we'll leave in the stuff about the brushes, but probably do a couple of comparisons between the two brushes on the same model. That'd be quite fun, I think, to look at. Yeah.
And I also have some models that I want to show off next month. I'm just editing up the video I've just finished, but it's not quite ready to be publicized yet. So I'm going to wait until next month to show off those models. So there's more to come, but I had set myself a little bit of a challenge because of lockdown and everyone staying at home. We've got plenty of free time. So I went for the challenge of painting one model every day for a week. So I did 7 models, and so next month I will show those off and we'll see how well I did.
Whereas I do 7 models a night.
Show off.
Yeah, well, to sum up then, as always, we'll put some photos up of some of these models up close so you can see. Hopefully Ed can put a side-by-side of both of these in the same picture. That might work quite well.
Yeah, I should be able to manage that. I can edit that together and then upload the edited version up to our Instagram page. Link in the description. I'm Ed Scar.
And I'm Poir.
Thank you very much for watching, and join us next time when we get back to the brush.
Bye.